Loud. Haribo Gurudev, can you try speaking to see if I did it right? Haribo. So how are things? Is there anything you'd like to share before you answer the questions? It's good to see you.
Yes, there are a couple things. We had some sad news when our cow Rati, who's the smallest cow in the world, miniature zebu, passed away last night. She's been taken care of by Gopal Nandini and Krishna Chaitanya. Contacted some type of blood disease, so that was sad. But she was surrounded by devotees at the time, and so it was an auspicious passing. But another note, tomorrow I'm going to start publishing excerpts. The editors of the Harmonists are going to publish excerpts from my book for 8 days in a row on the Harmonist regarding Baladev, Balaram, Tattva. So giving them the permission to subdivide a couple of chapters with subtitles and headings and so forth, so that they're bite-sized articles. It's from the Tattva section of the book, so it's quite a bit to digest, but it's significant and interesting. It clearly illustrates the focus of the Goswamis, founding acharyas, on Balaram, their perspective and so forth. So there's, I think, 8 articles, maybe 6 articles about Balaram, and then it goes from those to an appendix that is connected to that particular chapter on Balaram, which is about Ananga Manjari, and who is thought to be by some connected with Balaram. So it'll be very interesting. And I think the last one will be something from the Leela section of the book. So put a sweet at the end. But it's all quite interesting. It hasn't been finished really in terms of editing, but I think it's good enough for the Harmonist. And so I alert you all to that. I hope you'll take advantage of it. It'll be good. Build up to Baldev Purnim, which is a week from tomorrow. And I think that's the news that I have. There might have been one other thing, I can't remember now, but otherwise things are well here at our dar. We've got a lot of tomatoes and eggplants and zucchinis and peppers of all varieties. It's quite abundant. A lot of plums right now also. Figs are coming, a lot of figs. Plenty of milk, quite bountiful.
So, yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and take the questions.
Sure. Pamanabha Swami, do you want to ask your question first?
Jai Guru Maharaj.
Jai Maharaj.
Yes, I wanted to ask if you all could share some words about the idea of Nam Sankirtan as the Yuga Dharma, in the sense of we know it's a Yuga Dharma, but sometimes it's not so much like established as if you will, a fixed sadhana per day. Let's say, like if a devotee may have like certain number of rounds to chant. And so I would like to know about your personal approach to that. How you as guru what do you expect regarding disciples in general, how them to engage in Nam Sankirtan as a form of daily sadhana, or not? As I don't know. I would like to hear you about sharing some ideas in that regard, because sometimes one may think of kirtan as, of course, writing and preaching and chanting japa, but specifically about Nam Sankirtan regarding one's personal sadhana, how much do you conceive of it of something like necessary on a daily basis, or if you could share some ideas in that regard.
Yeah. Of course, what Marsh is asking about is a detail. The principle is that Nam Sankirtan and Kirtan of the Mahamantra has been established for our lineage by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. We learn through the pen of Vrindavan Das Thakur in Chaitanya Bhagavat. We also find from the writings of, I think, Rupa Goswami, Chaitanya Astakam, description of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chanting the Mahamantra and counting. And apparently he would chant on a rope with knots. So later, of course, as the Sampradaya was formed, with his blessing by Sanatana Goswami, through and with regard to ritual and so forth, his book Hari Bhakti Vilas describes the chanting on japa beads, tulsi beads, or lotus beads, 108 beads, and so on and so forth. So the principle is to chant. It's the Yuga Dharma, Nam Kirtan. The Upanishad tells us that not only is Nam Kirtan the Yuga Dharma, means of deliverance for the Yuga of Kali, but specifically the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, in the Kali Santarana Upanishad. So, excuse me. So that's the principle, and then the detail is, I think, what Mars is asking about. So the point being that different gurus may have different expectations of their students or different prescriptions for them. It's well known, of course, that Prabhupada wanted his disciples to chant 16 rounds on their beads daily. Initially, he wanted them to chant 64 rounds, and they were not able to do that. And then he asked them to do 32 rounds. They weren't able to do that. And then 16 seemed to work. And so he fixed the number at 16, and that became the standard. He himself writes in his Nectar of Devotion, he gives this as an example of one of Rupa Goswami's angas of bhakti. Forget what the exact title or name of the anga is, but it's with regard to accepting vows, and not accepting vows that one can't live up to, something like that. Which can be counterproductive. And there he gives an example that he asked his students to chant 16 rounds. So he clearly demonstrates in that passage that this is a detail. He fixed the number at that, and he was very insistent about it. There are some examples. There was a famous tennis player, I forget his name, but he was involved with the movement, and he met Prabhupada personally and spoke with him, and he wanted to be initiated, but he could never chant more than 12 rounds, and Prabhupada wouldn't initiate him. So, you see an example of how strict he was about it and how he emphasized this this point. I remember that Tamal Krishna Maharaj was serving Prabhupada in Vrindavan, and Prabhupada was keeping him pretty busy. And he told Prabhupada he didn't have time to chant all of his rounds, and Prabhupada said, then sleep less. He didn't give in. So he's very strong about that. So the benefit will be very good if one can do that. That's something we should take from it. Of course, now we're, with regard to myself and my students, we're a generation later, and this application of a detail with regard to chanting is has to be thought of in terms of time and circumstance and so forth. And so the time really and the circumstances now that we find most devotees in our mission spread out all over the world, not living in ashrams, not most of them not teenagers. There is, and 50 years later or so, is the times are quite different. There was, for example, a period in Prabhupada's mission when I didn't even know who the president of the United States was. So it's hard to not know now, unfortunately. But so much information is available, not only about the world, but also about our tradition and about other Vaishnava sects and so on and so forth. So it's, having lived in both times, I can tell you it's very, very, very different. We were young people, students of Prabhupada. We were all, many of us had already left home and were living on the streets. So to join an ashram was the ultimate step in dropping out, if you will, and was easy to take because we already had at least taken half of the step. So anyway, circumstances are different. So there may be scope for rethinking that detail. And so I have done that, and I have also seen, of course, unfortunately, that given the circumstances, not only in the world today and how devotees are situated separately rather than living communally, at least in our Sangha, for the most part, and being international, not only that, but also there's repercussions, if you will, of misrepresentation of Gaudiya Vaishnavism that are far-reaching and have touched many, many devotees. It's something that myself and others as students of Prabhupada had no experience of, in relation to Prabhupada, but with his passing and so forth. We got a good dose of that, and it had a devastating effect on a lot of devotees in their maybe their faith, not in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, but their faith in terms of enthusiasm to proceed, becoming disenfranchised by authorities inappropriately, or for reasons of good philosophical understanding, departing from Prabhupada's mission, but then lacking the kind of social support that such a cohesive mission, if you will, offers, put many devotees, disciples of Prabhupada in awkward situations, made it difficult for them. They needed certain things, that they had certain things that were part of their life that made it possible for them to meet certain expectations of Prabhupada. And even departing from ISKCON for good reasons, some of them, they nonetheless were now at a loss of some factors that were significant in their life. And so they've been affected adversely by that. And then not only disciples of Prabhupada, but disciples of Prabhupada. Many of them, many of you have come to me through ISKCON or other sanghas that proved to be lacking in terms of good example and scriptural or spiritual authority. So, given that, I have to take all that into consideration, and for some, what's most important from my perspective, or has been over the years, is to secure their faith, because they came in touch with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teaching. They were involved, and something happened which was devastating for them. Again, the misrepresentation of the philosophy on the part of spiritual authorities and so forth. And so, rather than insisting on that they follow a certain protocol that they had previously, I saw fit to make adjustments as need be to secure their faith, and to help to situate them under the guidance of a Vaishnava like myself, who they had come to. And so, given those kind of circumstances, I have made adjustments with that, and the basically the adjustment that I have made has been to ask the disciples and friends connected with me to, given in all honesty, given their circumstances, to choose a number of rounds to chant on their beads of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, discuss that with me, and then have my blessing to commit to that number of rounds. And this is certainly a practice or a detail that is reasonable, all things considered, many of which I've mentioned, and the fact, again, in general, that this is a detail. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to ask the disciples not to let their mala fast. And the implication was that if they didn't have a lot of practical service, they would chant 64 rounds. If they had practical service, they'd at least chant 4 rounds. But this kind of thing, again, requires some, real honesty on the part of the disciple, if you give them that kind of latitude. Prabhupada didn't give the latitude, and fixed it at 16, and he was strict about it, and he had his reasons for it. So that said, that has been my policy. However, I would like to emphasize, and I thank Maharaj for giving me the opportunity to do so, the importance of chanting and to make clear to you that the policy that I've just discussed, that I have put in place, has reasons that some of which I've mentioned. And therefore, if your faith is secured, then you have reason to increase the chanting daily that you're doing. And I think that 16 rounds is a good number, and that some of you have committed to 4 rounds, 8 rounds. Some have committed to 32 rounds. That's between me and you, but I would like to see as the chanting of 16 rounds a day, something that all the devotees should strive for. Bhaktivinoda, of course, told his disciples to chant 1 round, and as the taste increases, add more and never go backwards. So it doesn't have to stop at 16 either. But usually it takes a couple hours a day. So again, it's easier if you're living in an ashram and you don't have any kids, and which are kind of the circumstances that most of Prabhupada's disciples were in, and didn't have a job and so forth, and hundreds of other people were going to Mangal Artik with you every day. It's a little easier to do that. I should mention, though, despite the adversities and distractions, especially in householder life, there was a standard in the Gaudiya Vedanta Samiti, founded by Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj, Prabhupada's godbrother, and that was that the devotees in the math, the brahmacharis, would chant at least 16 rounds, and the householders would chant 32 because there was more distraction. Of course, that's the distraction of householder life in India, close to a century ago. It's quite a bit less than what we have today. So that's my policy, and I would like to see everyone increase the chanting of their rounds, and for sannyasis like Maharaj, at least 16 rounds a day. You really need to log in for this because it's the most recommended practice, if you will, and so we should take advantage of that. So, does that help, Maharaj? Is that what you were looking for?
Yes, Guru Maharaj. And one detail as a follow-up, if possible, since in one point my question actually had to do especially also with Nam Sankirtan, besides japa. Of course, your answer was great and very helpful, but also I would like, if possible, for you to share your thoughts about Nam Sankirtan in itself as a daily sadhana, and if you conceive also that it should be some time spent in that and so on.
Well, first of all, I think that the example of chanting in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela amongst his associates was Haridas Thakur. He was dubbed the Namacharya. So he was teaching by his example, chanting, and it said that he chanted 300,000 names a day. And it took him, 22 and a half hours or something like that a day. So he was pretty absorbed in the chanting. But in Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the Bengali script, there often the chanting of Haridas Thakur is referred on Japa Mala is referred to as Sankirtan. So also to support that idea, it's been said elsewhere, I can't recall the reference, but the japa is, of course, is a subdivision, sub-anga of the anga, the limb of bhakti called smaranam. which has 5 or 6 broad categories, and then this is a subcategory, japa. But if the japa of Harinam is chanted aloud, then it becomes a sub-anga of kirtan. As far as, I don't know if you're referring to this, of Sankirtan in the public, on the streets.
Not necessarily, but maybe congregational chanting, group chanting with other devotees that,
Right.
again, maybe daily dynamics do not allow that much now, whatever.
Right. But often devotees think that Harinam Sankirtan implies or necessitates being in the public and chanting, but it doesn't. You can sit with kartals and chant aloud. There was a time in ISKCON in Bombay when devotees were doing Nam Sankirtan outside, which was fairly common in those days, but the public was not respecting it. So Prabhupada stopped it. So just a point to consider, because a lot of devotees, they say things like, if only more devotees were out in the streets chanting, then everything would change, and not necessarily. So he stopped it. So I don't think that's necessary for devotees. As far as in their amongst themselves, I don't think it's necessary. If one's doing japa, if one can't get absorbed in the japa, then you can put down your beads and chant aloud and sing for 2 hours or an hour or half an hour or whatever may be the case. The idea is to try to become absorbed. So if you put a couple hours a day into that in one form or another, I think that should be sufficient.
Thank
And
you.
it depends where devotees are. If they live in an ashram, they have a temple, there are artiks accompanied by kirtan or something, then. But the kirtan is, of course, I'm looking at devotees and I'm thinking, she lives with, over here, he lives over there by himself. He's not, so to get together with other devotees may be difficult for them. But of course, if we have proximity to other devotees, then we should get together as often as possible and do kirtan together. Sit and there's a lot of the devotees in the eastern part of North Carolina in our Sangha, they get together like that regularly and do kirtan. That's very, very good to see. So if you have the opportunity with other devotees, then should definitely partake of that. It's very powerful. Okay.
Yeah, Guru Maharaj, thank you very much.
Okay, what
I
else?
think Panchatampa has a question or comment.
Yep, Haribol Maharaj.
Okay. Hari.
So I just wanted to, you mentioned that Prabhupada was very strict, but he did make one exception with Govardhan Prabhu. And I think you've cited that as well, where he actually admitted to not chanting his rounds.
Yeah.
And they tried to remove him from the post of temple president. And Prabhupada said, at least he's honest. How do I know you're chanting your rounds? And he immediately reinstated Govardhan as president.
Jai. Govardhan Das Ki Jai.
Haribol.
Jai. Yeah, I remember that. Thank you.
Indra, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj, and all the devotees. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I was just wondering, that's not my big question, but just like since your accident last week, are you okay physically?
I'm getting better.
Okay, that's good to hear. So my question also relates to chanting, and you just kind of answered it. You just said that the idea is to become absorbed. So I don't know if other devotees feel the same way, but sometimes I'm struggling. And I do chant with Srila Prabhupada. And I was just wondering, what is your take on this, to chant like with, like, you know, listening while you're chanting?
Like listening
You
to
know what I mean?
on a tape, chanting, you mean? Yeah. Yeah, that's useful. We used to do that. Yeah. So if that's fine. But it's really, there's no like rule here, but whatever works. Hmm?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in recommending that devotees chant with attention, said to blindfold yourself and lock the door. Hmm. So, you know, that's an example of somehow or other. Hmm. So the principle is to become absorbed however you can do it. Um, in fact, with regard to absorption in Krishna consciousness, there's an extreme example in the Bhagavatam that's often cited in the 7th canto that Nard refers to. Speaking to Yudhisthira, he says that Kamsa was absorbed, and even negatively. Sisupal was absorbed out of enmity and so forth. And there were positive results, you know, from that. He says, if only I could become as absorbed as they were. So the implication is not to be absorbed like they are, but as absorbed they are, but as they are, but favorably. So somehow or other, and so with the chanting, the chanting kirtan should result in smaranam. It should catapult one into a trance. But so you can, you know, take your temperature there and see how you're doing with that. Keep at it, and to be successful. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. What else?
Sumati, do you want to ask your question? I can unmute you, Sumati, if you need some help.
I got it.
Okay.
I'm reading in the Chaitanya Charitamrita when Lord Chaitanya is instructing Srila Rupa Goswami, and he's talking about the 5 mellows, and this one verse is just, in addition to the 5 direct mellows, there's 7 indirect mellows. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, when Shantarati, neutral attraction, is continuously existent and mixed with ecstatic emotion, and when the devotee relishes that neutral position, it is called Shanta Bhakti Rasa. Shanta Bhakti Rasa devotees generally relish the impersonal feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I was confused about that, because I thought the Shanta Bhakti devotees were devotees like in Vaikuntha, who just worshipped more in awe and reverence, but not that they were impersonal. And in another place, he mentioned that the Shantarasa devotees meditate on the Paramatma feature of Krishna.
Yeah. Shantarasa is not something that's emphasized in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami cites Rupa Goswami's verse from Vidagdha Madhava, glorifying Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he employs that. Krishnadas as his Ashirvad Sloka. There it said, Unatos Rasa Sabhakti Sriyam, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give the special kind of the brightest jewel of rasa. Ujjvala is a term that's used prior to Rupa Goswami amongst in Indian aesthetics to refer to the romantic feelings. Shringarasa. Madhurya is a term that is invoked by Krishnadas, maybe by Rupa Goswami as well. That's also an earlier term that they've taken from there. But at any rate, that's the, that Radha Dasyam, the highest ideal, so to speak, that comes through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Later in the chapter, though, that expands upon elaborates upon that verse, Krishnadas says, that said, also other bhavas or mellows. Forget the exact verse, but he mentions others as well. And so in the broader sense, as we sometimes discussed, through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, one will do well to take shelter of him in pursuit of any particular bhava or rasa. But that said, Shantarasa is not emphasized, and it is a rasa that in which one cannot attain prema, only rati. Rati is, if that is churned, it can turn into prema, but in Shantarasa, one cannot attain prema. And prema is the prayojan in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's ideal. So Shantarasa is not emphasized, and it also is the one of the 5 principal rasas that can be changed. So by association, a Shantarasa bhakta could become a Sakya rasa bhakta or a Dasi bhakta, and so forth. So some peculiarities about the rasa. But yes, with regard to the object, one of the reasons that Rupa Goswami has accepted Shanta as a rasa, which other secular authors on Indian aesthetics, some of them have not, and it's debatable, is because it's thought of in terms of impersonal liberation, which has no object. So for rasa, you have to have an object. So those aestheticians, if you will, they don't accept that. They would look at mukti as something beyond rasa. Of course, we have our own. Rupa Goswami has given a different perspective and written about it in a compelling way. Most of the secular authors on rasa, they of course were religious people in India as well. Majority of them did not recognize bhakti as a rasa. Conversely, Rupa Goswami doesn't recognize anything as a rasa other than bhakti. Only bhakti is a rasa. So it's interesting what he's done with that. But in Rupa Goswami's system, then the Shantarasa does have an object, and because it has an object, then it can be a rasa. Because you need, and for rasa, there needs to be the object of love, and there needs to be the love. There's the two, right? So the object of love is the Paramatma, or an Aishwarya, majestic form of the absolute. That said, there are several instances cited in the Bhagavatam of sadhus preoccupied with the Nirvishesh Brahman that have became Shanta Bhaktas, like Sukadev, like the Kumaras, like the Navayogendras in 11th canto, I believe. So I think that Prabhupada's kind of stretching it a little bit and not being as precise and saying that many Shantarasa devotees are preoccupied with Nirvisesh Brahman, as Kumaras were, as Sukadeva was. But then they came to Shantarasa from there. Shantarasa is preoccupied with the what I refer to, using a Catholic term, the beatific vision. It's passive adoration. So there's no interest in the Leelas, associates, and so forth, just the form of God. So again, it's peculiar compared to the other rasas, and lacking in some respects. But we do include it as a rasa. And yes, you're correct to come up with a question there, because for it to be a rasa, it has to have an object, and the object is the Paramatma. But many of them come there passing through preoccupation with Brahman. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Whereas Brahman realization, Brahma Sayuja, merging in Brahman, is a liberated state that is kind of quite a distance, if you will, in terms of bliss, if you can measure such, from Shantarasa. So it's quite an elevation for Sukadeva, for the Kumaras, and so forth.
Yeah, Prabhupada also said that if somebody in Shantarasa were to see Krishna, they wouldn't have any desire to serve him. It's just enough, I guess, just to appreciate him.
Passive adoration.
Yeah.
So a big step from there to Dasya Rasa, right?
Right.
You can't sit down in Dasya Rasa.
Thank you.
Okay. What else?
Tadas?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
See you.
Yesterday and today, I was listening a couple of your lectures where you were speaking about Chaturvyuha, and it happened so that at the same time I was reading a book of Suhotra Swami, which is called Vedanta Psychology, where he speaks about the same topic as well, about the Chaturvyuha, and it's like your lectures and this book, it like helps each other to understand more, but still I would like to ask a couple questions. You gave an example about the chitta, buddhi, and manas with a flute, with the listening to flute music. That you aware of the flute with the chitta, and then you identify with the buddhi that this is flute, and then with manas you decide if you like that or not like that. Yeah. And this is our like daily activity with our like subtle body. Yeah, we do that all the time. And each aspect of that Chaturvyuha is somehow responsible for the each aspect of the subtle body, as I understand. Yeah. But the thing that I don't understand is, how are they responsible for that? Are they responsible just for the how to say, what do they do? Like, what do the Sankarshan or Vasudeva or whatever do with that subtle body? How do they regulate that or sustain it? I don't understand that. You know, like, what is the role in that in the how do they make my subtle body work, or don't they? How does it, how is they related? So like this is the one part of the question, and the second is related to the today's class with that absorption in japa or kirtan, and that trance state, yeah, that we get into. So how can we make that state more easy to attain? Is it somehow related to them, to the Chaturvyuha? Like, can we, how to say, I don't know, can we get in contact with them to get easier to the trance? I don't know if you understand what I mean.
Yeah. So Tadas is speaking about the Chaturvyuha, which means the fourfold expansion, for example, of Krishna in Vrindavan and Balaram. They expand as Vasudeva Krishna and Sankarshan. In Mathura, and then into Dwarka, where Aniruddha and Pradyumna become the son and grandson of Krishna, and there you have in Goloka this fourfold Chaturvyuha, which is also present in Vrindavan. I haven't been able to identify Aniruddha, but Ujjval is arguably representative of Pradyumna there. But at any rate, then from there, you have the Vaikuntha expansion of the Lord as Narayan, also referred to as Vasudeva, and then surrounded by a Vaikuntha expression of Sankarshan, Pradyumna, Aniruddha. And this is the second Chaturvyuha. And then in this world, Sankarshan, Mahasankarshan from Vaikuntha manifests as the Mahavishnu, and Pradyumna as the Garbhodakshay Vishnu, and Aniruddha as the Kshirodakshay Vishnu, presiding, this is the point that you're coming to, as they do over the Sankarshan over Ahankar, ego, Pradyumna over intelligence, Aniruddha over buddhi, intelligence, Aniruddha over manas, and then remaining, of course, in Vaikuntha is Vasudeva Narayan, presiding over the chitta. So your question, if I understand it correctly, is what does it mean that they preside over these aspects of the subtle body? And how can we, take advantage of that? Is there some way, and so forth? I don't think that there's much to be said about that, to be honest with you. But in Hinduism, there are deities that preside over anything and everything, places and features of the body, and so forth. For example, we mark our body with 12 places with tilak, and invoke a particular name of Vishnu at that time, and so forth. So in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, we don't have any prescribed kind of method, if you will, for worshiping the presiding deities of the subtle body in such a way as to enhance our practice, because I guess in one sense we are engaged in worshiping Krishna, who is the source of all these expansions. They're all within him. So in a sense, we do venerate, we worship the presiding deity, but we do it in the form of Krishna, through Krishna Nam and the deity of Krishna and Balaram as well. and any separate method of worshiping Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and there may be procedures for this in the Tantra, the Pancharatra, and so forth. They're not something that's been called upon by Sanatana Goswami or Rupa Goswami in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And again, because we have a path, if you will, that includes within it any such worship through the veneration of the worship of Krishna, and particularly through the chanting of his name. So I think, we kind of just look at that in a passive sense, that these features of the Antakaran, like other aspects of our psychological and biological self and the world, for that matter, have presiding deities. Let me give you another example. There's presiding deities over all the different rasas. So the deity that presides over Sakiras is Upendra, the friend and brother of, that means Vamana, of Indra. But we don't worship Vamana to enhance our capacity to attain Sakirasa. But probably Rupa Goswami has just taken from what has been said before him with regard to presiding deities over the rasas, colors that represent them, and so forth and so on. So there's a lot of presiding deities over, that point being, as I'm saying, over so many things, but we worship Krishna, and whatever they can do, he can do, and more. So there's no better way to enter into a meditative state than Nam Sankirtan. And how you do that most effectively? Well, you have to pay attention. How you pay attention, focus your mind, you have to give your heart, as I said before, because wherever you give your heart, that's where your mind is going to go. So it's not a tongue exercise or an ear exercise, but it's a heart exercise. We should cry because we don't cry. That we should cry because that Mahaprabhu, he's crying. Why when I chant, I don't cry? Why when I chant, my hairs don't stand on end? And weeping in that way. So this is his Shikshastakam has shown the way to chant effectively, humbly, with tolerance, respecting others, expecting no honor for oneself. Those types of, this is the decorum. One should incorporate these things, and make the chanting is kind of it's not something you just do when you sit down, in other words. So you have to prepare yourself for chanting by decorating yourself with these qualities and so forth. And so I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. That's what I wanted to know, if that Chaturvyuha are the same as the other demigods who are responsible, for the blinking, for the other stuff that my body would work, So I just wanted to know if they are at the same level, because it is like Vishnu Tattva, so it's like God, you can say. So I thought it is more important, that they are responsible for the subtle body. So just
well, they're certainly different than the ordinary demigods, and they're presiding over something that is a subtle body that has the ability to reflect consciousness proper, and they are from the world of consciousness proper. So they're presiding over that in this world, which is the closest thing to consciousness proper. In other words, consciousness proper is subjective, and then there's the objective world. And then you have this world of mind, which is subjective, quasi-subjective, so to speak. It's a feature of matter that's consciousness-like, comparatively. So you have the presiding deities from the world of consciousness itself. Now, if you went to the Ramanuja Sampradaya or the Madhva Sampradaya, which I think the Ramanuja Sampradaya, you might find then worship of the presiding deities of the subtle body as part of their process. Vaikuntha, being their goal, they have many temples with deities of Mahavishnu lying down and so forth. So our focus is Goloka, and within that in Vrindavan. So it's a little different. Okay. Good.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. So yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to ask if you wanted to answer another question or you wanted to stop here.
Is there another question?
Yeah, Gopal Nandini had a question.
Okay, I don't have too much time for it, but I'll give a short answer. I'll try to give a short answer.
I can ask later if that's helpful. It's fine.
Okay, yeah. I do have something else
Sure. Sorry.
to do shortly here. So, okay, nice to talk with you all. I have to
Yeah,
read
thank you.
next week and look on the Harmonist starting tomorrow for those articles. Okay.
Jai.
Haribo.
Haribo. And if the other devotees could just stay on, I just have a few announcements about the classes for, well, the upcoming classes. Let me open it up. So just as a reminder, on August 3rd, which is, next Monday, Gurudev's giving a class at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time, Eastern Daylight Saving. I always forget how to say that. For Baladev Purnim. And then on August 11th, he's giving a class at 11:30. And then for Janmashtami on August 12th, he's giving a class, I think, at 11:30 for Prabhupada's Appearance Day. And then August 25th at 11:30 for Radhastami. And that's on Sri Chaitanya Sangha, just to, you can see that visually. I don't know if I said all that right, but yeah, hopefully, if you have any questions, you can just message me and I could send that.
Yeah, just tell everyone, well, it's going to be translated from...
right, there's going to be Spanish translation as well, yeah.
And so we expect that it's going to be over 100 devotees, and so we've set up Facebook Live to be happening simultaneously. So if you don't get on to Zoom, you can get on to the Facebook Live. First 100 people will get on Zoom, and then after that, you'll go on to Facebook Live. So that's that.
Yeah, thanks for supplementing that, because I was kind of a mess when trying to explain.
Sure, yeah. No
because I was like, I don't understand.
Yeah, totally, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Haribol.
Yeah, well, Haribol, thanks everyone.
Sorry, let's see everyone, hear everybody, and see everyone next week.
Yeah.
Haribol.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna. See you. Thank you.
Yeah.